Hello, greetings everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you are today. Before I get started on today's webinar, I would like to wish you all a happy, healthy, and prosperous new year. Today's webinar is going to be focusing on the patterns to observe and avoid in Agile Ceremonies. For those of you that already know me, I am still Dr. Sriram Rajagopalan. For those of you that do not know me, I am Sriram Rajagopalan, working as an enterprise Agile evangelist currently. I have my doctoral degree in organizational leadership, MBA in management, Master of Science in computer engineering, and a bachelorate degree in electronics and communication engineering. I also started my career a long time back as a software engineer and then moved along as a team leader, business analyst, project manager, scrum master, and agile coach. I have served in the capacities of director and vice president as well. I have a number of different certifications to my credential. They include portfolio management, program management, project management, risk management, agile, scrum, a number of different other things like Six Sigma, Black Belt. I'm also an instructional designer, speaker, writer, and author. I have training and teaching experience in a number of colleges in a number of different universities and countries as well. So today's webinar is part of the 4-part series this is our third webinar, and we are moving into the journey into the Agile with Inflectra third series, and this is our third seminar in that 4-part series. Each webinar is approximately 1 hour long. We will reserve time towards the end for questions. Sometimes the webinars may introduce a concept using a tool. And so far we have had agile engineering practices and writing good user stories towards the end of last year. And we are starting this year with patterns to avoid in Agile Ceremonies. And on January 23rd, we will be focusing on the last part of this webinar series, incorporating Lean and Kanban in product lifecycle management. So basically, from my own experience, number of times I feel like the waterfall exists only in people's mindset. It exists only in practice, not in theory. But if waterfall never worked, according to a number of people, and we embraced Agile because of the failure of waterfall, we also need to know the practices that actually led to waterfall's failure. And if these practices continued, then Agile will also fail because we will continue to take those same practices that led to waterfall's failure, and Agile will also fail, right? And so what are some of the reasons that cause Agile to fail? When you look at this, from my own understanding, there are 4 important pillars that contribute to Agile's failure. And they are not put in any particular order or anything here, but executive's vision, which is how the executives consider how the Agile will be used and to what extent it will be used. And then the ability of the team, the maturity of the team to adapt the practices properly and get used to those practices correctly. And then the process, just enough processes, not too much, not too little, just so that you have enough processes to keep everything in check. And then constantly having a technical excellence, and if that technical myopia, which I call as short-sightedness, exists, then all these things contribute to Agile's failure. And in my Agile transformation consulting kind of experience, I have seen a number of different people come up with several things, and some of those important things that I have seen are listed over here. And these are the most common things that I keep hearing from many people. So one of them is our iterations are too long, so we use sprints. Well, if you are using iteration and sprint in a different meaning, then you neither understand Agile nor the process of Scrum, right? The framework within Scrum. We do daily stand-up. As a result, we should be Agile. Don't necessarily understand what leads to daily stand-up, but you do daily stand-up and you think like you are using Agile. You are no longer using the project status checks meetings. We are lean. As a result, we don't have a product owner and we all together do the product owner role. Well, that's another, smell pattern. And every software development lifecycle stage is done in one sprint. So, one sprint or iteration, we focus on design. The other iterations, we focus on development. The other iteration, we focus on testing. And then we actually, deploy. That's also not necessarily understanding properly Agile. Working software equals number of closed Jira tickets. Like, we are trying to see how many tickets we are closing. As a result, we are basically telling the working software is the result of all the work that is already done in Jira, right? And then we had to choose the wrong technology stack. We were not allowed to, pick our own technology stack. Executive management said this, and so we picked this, and now we are where we are because of, what we had chosen. So these are all reasons why many times people say Agile is not working, or you can observe these as a patterns, right? As a result of this, there's a lot of group that will basically come back and say Agile never works. Right, and these are those people that basically says like, okay, I've tried it, it has not worked for me, and as a result, Agile never works. So extend it to be a hypothesis. And there is other group that basically says everything is Agile. It works fine for me, so I would like to make sure that every problem is the same night, that I can use the same hammer to hit it. Right, so everything is Agile. So there is a big spectrum of people which they don't understand Agile properly, and as a result, they fail to implement it right. So what are some of those Agile failure patterns? Now, when you look at this, the team is the face of Agile. As a result, every time Agile failure is being discussed, people are going to look only at the team. At the team level, we can definitely have some problems, task orientation. So everybody is looking at the number of tickets that needs to be closed. Everybody is starting to look at how, to what granular level we had to break down all the different tasks and things like that. And people may be spread across multiple work, and as a result, they are overburdened. As a result, they are not able to actually do the work. So that's one pattern. The other pattern is failure to build team consensus. A group of people get together in a room and say, this is what the next iteration is supposed to be, and the team never actually committed to it. It's a team's commitment, and then the team commitment does not exist, and we have not done that right, which manifests itself into neglection of technical excellence. Let's get together something and get things moving, and we are incurring technical debt. And at some point, we need to pay the debt, and we are having a lot of problems. And finally, we are practicing Agile without truly understanding the principles that go along with that. But these are the main thing that immediately surface. But deeper within that, the team is supported by the culture and the strategy of the company. Right? When you look at that, the deeper problems start coming up. And those deeper problems are going to be inconsistent or siloed adoption of Agile within the organization. So some units are actually following it, other units are not following. Like, development organization coming and telling we want to be Agile, but the testers are never wanting to be associated themselves with Agile and say, like, we will follow waterfall. Right? That's the inconsistent or siloed adoption. Okay. Then weak product strategy. There is no clear, articulated, prioritized, risk-adjusted product backlog to begin with. And that's primarily because the business strategy is not clear, and the business strategy is not properly articulated to the product strategy, or the product strategy hasn't done their homework correctly to actually identify what is the value-added benefit we are giving to the company as a result of doing or not doing this product appropriately. The cultural conditioning, how the culture within the organizational structure is creating this mantra of it's okay to fail, it's not okay to fail, and as a result, we are constantly combating with the culture. Okay. And when you look at all these things, ultimately it's boiling down to the lack of executives' commitment. So their ability to constantly be available, provide the support, and extend the team's capabilities constantly is not present. So deeper inside that is going to be the organizational structure that is actually epidemic to all these other problems that we are continuously seeing. Right. So some of my own experience, I extended some elements of the chaos and control kind of approach in what we do versus how we do. So when you look at this, there are 4 different dimensions that come up. And the one end is going to be the chaos. The organization does not know why they exist, or the product department does not know why they have to create this product. Somebody told, and the result they are actually creating. They have not really understood what is the positioning of the product within the organizational structure, organizational business strategy, and how this is going to actually expand the profitability, adaptability, and all those elements of the company's revenue scheme. right? And when they do get some information and all those things, we move into some of the chaotic control. So we want to do some exploratory. We don't know what we are doing, so we'll try to do certain things and see how we will do it. But that's actually, showing leadership immaturity, because somebody tell what we should be doing rather than, okay, this is the area where we are going, and so now help us get there. It's not there. And the next opposite end of that particular spectrum is going to be control. When things are really not working, or when things are, failing, customer base is, thinning down. So what happens is myopic vision. So we don't know what we are trying to do. We have some ideas. We wanted to make sure that this is hitting. And so we are coming up with all kinds of macroscopic management and inflexible structure to somehow make things work. And we want to have too much control on this. Now that's also not good. The best place where we can be is going to be controlled chaos. We don't know everything, but we know something. With that something, we need to continue to move forward. That is very important, because, for instance, take innovation and creativity. You can come up with a specific result that will definitely be doable, or something that we can proceed with as a result of doing an innovation. That experiment may fail, and we may come back and say, well, we tried this, it is not working, and so we'll move forward with the next approach. So that's the learning adaptive organization, with a balance of both on strategy and execution. We can't be too many experiments. We can be actually not doing any experiments at all. So there needs to be a delicate balance, and we need to get to that. Right? So that's the approach that I have taken so far. And based upon that, I have basically come down with some ideas. That is, iteration planning it needs to begin with a good product backlog. It needs to have a good product backlog, at least to some element of the future. It needs to be able to predict, that needs to be present. And once that is present, then we have to start empowering the team during the daily stand-up to self-organize faster. The faster they are able to self-organize, the more productivity you can get. Right? And then the review session. In the review session, there has to be a constant approach to keep focusing on grooming the backlog. Every session, every encounter is going to be an idea for new ideas, and those ideas have to be flushed into the product backlog so that they can be worked out. Okay. And finally, the retrospective. We need to have an operational excellent mindset, which is going to be focusing on, how do I increase throughput through productivity enhancements, through operational efficiency, and all those elements. So how do I, get those things set up across the organization? That needs to be present. So the Agile ceremonies, which are these four, iteration planning, daily stand-up review, and retrospective, they need to sow the success seeds for how Agile will flourish in the organization. And it's a collective work. It's not going to be one person's game, right? It's a collective work. And so based upon that, I have come down with 12 critical patterns that I have seen that actually has been separated into 4 different segments, okay? 4 different groups. So on the first element, strategy is failing. Well, when you look at why strategy fails, there are different reasons that come up. One is a dedicated product owner is not present. The coach and the product owner are the same person. Priority stories are not completely ready. So these are all the reasons why strategy fails. And I will expand each and every one of them as to how they manifest later. Right? And then planning fails. As a result of, not having a proper strategy, our planning approaches don't work out the way they are supposed to be. So planning focuses on selecting stories only and not necessarily actually breaking them down. Coaches are tasked with creating the actual task that needs to be done. And then we constantly are still in the mindset of estimation in hours, right? All these are, some patterns that come up. And then on the team side, people are not ready with the updates. They're not self-organized. As a result, they're not ready with the updates. And then the right metrics are not set up for the team to succeed. Okay. And finally, the risks. Whenever there is a risk, we wait for the next stand-up meeting to actually bring this up rather than constantly collaborate. Okay. And as a result of all these things, the processes are failing. Okay. So we have too many meetings to discuss all these problems. The reviews do not bring the appropriate stakeholders so that we can continuously have an opportunity to groom the product backlog and get more feedback. The retrospectives are becoming more optional. We don't have too much time for this. Let's not do the retrospective. Let's move forward. So these are all some of those important pivotal patterns that I have seen that actually contribute to Agile's failure. And I want to take through each and every one of them and how they manifest in different Agile ceremonies. These patterns are not going to be, it is going to impact only planning, it's going to impact only the review, it's going to impact only the daily stand-up, or it's going to impact only the retrospective. It can have a combination effect in multiple Agile ceremonies. So why strategy fails? When strategy is failing, fundamentally, the Agile transformation has not been successful. Across the organization or within the unit. It could be, either one of them. So in order for Agile transformation to succeed, we definitely need to address some of those cultural issues. If you don't fix the culture, then we are never going to have strategy. As Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? And once we have the cultural issues fixed, then we would be able to understand a little bit more about the strategy and then start aligning our product strategy with the business strategy. So we need to focus on that. So if there is no dedicated product owner, it manifests in multiple ways. One way the lack of a dedicated product owner is going to be there is no product vision aligned with the business strategy. At the end of the day, we don't have a product owner to come back and say, this is where our product should be. These are the features our customers would require. These are the reasons why our product will become beneficial for the customers and the organization, the performing organization. Nothing of that sort works out. And next, if there is no dedicated product owner, everybody pitches in, but there is no accountability. There is no one person held accountable to make sure that that person is going and gathering appropriate users' feedback. We do not get that information at all. As a result, we do not pass some information to the appropriate groups who would actually push the product into the product penetration and product diversification stages, which is going to be the product marketing. They are stalled because they don't have any information as to what new features to actually promote. How do we get this information in the hands of the customer? How do I do user-centric marketing? And none of those things are really happening because the product owner is not providing any of those insights. As a result, we are slowly eroding our customer base. And when that continuously moves forward for a longer period of time, the product loses its revenue capability or profitability, and the product is shelved, right? And one person or one FTE full-time equivalent serves as a coach and a product owner. Now, this is another major problem over here. So this creates a role clash. So Agile coach as Scrum calls, Scrum Master and the product owner, they serve two different purposes. They are not one individual's role, responsibilities. And if you actually mix both of these roles in one particular individual, that individual is not having the time to balance all the information that they have to do. As a result, they introduce either the cognitive or motivational bias. Now, the cognitive bias is much more about systematic distortion within the organizational structure or the culture, right? What is endemic to the organization that is actually creating some problems. So people have become so subconsciously understanding this is how we operate over here. And so we allow things to go wrong. The other one is a motivational bias, and the motivational bias is specific interests of specific group members to prefer certain individuals or certain groups or certain outcomes, and as a result, prioritize things differently. Now, when that is coming, they are finding it, this individual will find it very difficult to balance value-added functionality that needs to be in the product versus the actual team that needs to be motivated and self-organized to actually do the work. How do I do this work? So that's a problem that will come up. That person is not going to keep everything in proper balance. And then the business stakeholders as a result are not constantly getting consulted. This product owner's goal is to go seek a number of different business stakeholders and gather more information about what are some of those features. As we said, what adds the return on investment for this particular product. And that needs to be there. And so the valuable features are not getting done, primarily because the product owner or the Scrum Master, the same person, is actually spending more time on the team side of it. And on the team side, if this person is not spending the time, the team is not coached. if the person spends more time on the product side, the team is not coached on the agile principles. So when things don't fall, go through correctly, then things are not working. So this person becomes missing in action, and then in the daily sprint or daily stand-up, this Scrum Master is not there, so people get together and talk whatever they need. And because this one person serves as a Scrum Master or coach, product owner is also not present. So there's an opportunity to have a dialogue for the business and technical people to collaborate on a daily basis is missing. Which is one of the principles of Agile, right? And then the third one is going to be the prioritized backlog is not ready, ahead of time. Now, whenever you are looking at the priority, it's all looking from what is the competitive advantage. Again, as I mentioned, it's all about strategy. Strategy is all about competitive advantage. So when the competitive advantage is coming from a product standpoint, a number of different things the product owner should focus on, which are, looking at different things like the existing competition. And Porter came back with the 5-force model, where you are looking at the existing competition, potential entries that can put your product in an inequilibrium, availability of the substitutes, and the bargaining power of buyers and suppliers. All those things have to be considered. When this product owner is not spending sufficient time to understand the market, the customer base, and the internal stakeholders that also have to provide additional thoughts, we are losing a lot of prioritization that needs to be constantly present in the market. So when the competitive advantage is not present, all these informations are constantly getting mixed, and as a result, we are losing how the product backlog should be constantly filled. And how would these things manifest itself? Okay, so the product backlog is not ready and fleshed out with appropriate personification of the users and the related user stories, the value-added user stories for those personas. So we are not having that, and as a result, the backlog is not ready. Additionally, there is no hardening iteration, or the iteration zero, as many people call. That's not being considered, where the team has to be getting ready with all the different things that needs to be enabling them to succeed in subsequent iterations. That's not being considered. So we move too fast and too quick. And the value-added user stories are not only considered, and we are also not considering the extreme persona. In some of the previous webinars, I had talked about the abuser persona. So how are you considering some of those extreme persona as the project continues to move forward? That's also not being considered, right? And we are too quickly trying to jump into a conclusion of, okay, we need to deliver all these things. What should our velocity be in order for us to deliver these commitments? So we are under pressure. So we become reactive to pressures, and we are actually trying to do those kind of things. So those are not necessarily a good approaches to move forward. So that's one way the strategy manifests itself as a failure. Okay. What are some of the antidotes to addressing the strategic failure? How do we address this? So when you look at this, the senior management has to commit to Agile. So as part of the Agile transformation, people have to go and talk to the senior management and make sure that they are able to commit to them. So this is where the enterprise Agile coaches to come in and make sure that they are able to get the process, the framework, everything properly settled within the organization, or even pilot this within a few organization entities and then move it forward. The next one is going to be the culture should actually be embraced within the organization. The agility as a culture should be enabled within the organization. So being able to try experimentation, being able to fail fast, and all those things have to be, embraced. Right? And then promote continuous learning over failure is not an option. So it's okay to fail. If you keep repeatedly failing on the same thing, that's a problem. But, there needs to be a promotion of continuous learning. How do we actually, do things much better and more better, cheaper, faster, and happier? We need to actually start looking at that constantly. If customers are important to us, we need to actually spend getting a dedicated product owner. And if customers are important according to the business strategy, then we have to actually have organizational senior management commit to having a product owner for the product or the portfolio of the products. Similarly, if employees are important, we need to make sure that we are getting a dedicated coach. And this coach is the one that's going to make sure that, proper facilitation of the agile practices and principles are properly adopted within the organization. Okay. And then we have to increase the transparency of the product backlog to to the entire organization. So, keeping it limited is not going to be very helpful. We need to increase transparency. And transparency is one of the empirical process of Agile. And if we don't understand this empirical process control, then we are not going to be enabling Agile appropriately within the organization. As part of our iteration planning as well, it will continuously fail. The next stage is going to be planning. So with the planning, I always say, start with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey basically said, start with the end in mind. When you talk about that, everything that you have could potentially go wrong. That's one of the reasons why when we are saying embrace change, we have to start thinking in terms of what could potentially impact our user stories to complete, and then incorporate risk in the planning. So the product backlog has to be risk adjusted, and the team has to be involved in the planning, so they have to understand where we are going, so they are able to basically come back with all those value added stories. And in other webinars, I had talked about not only commercial value add stories, but also business value add, technical value add, and process value add story that needs to be actually added. And product owner may or may not be technical, and the result has to actually rely on those team to provide those kind of additional stories. So when iteration planning is not properly done, we have a problem. So iteration planning technically is supposed to be spending 50% of the time on the user story selection, and then 50% of the time to be on the task breakdown, so that, right after iteration planning, when the iteration starts the following day, you are able to actually move forward, and, you are able to gain momentum. But if that's not happening, then the iteration planning is spending all the time in user story selection, and we are going afterwards to do the task breakdown of the user stories. People don't know, then they are committing to too much or too little, and as a result, things don't work out effectively. The next one is planning should not spend time on prioritization of the user stories for the iteration. The iteration, when you're getting ready for iteration planning, there has to be already, properly prioritized backlog already existing. It's not at that time, let's focus on what we have to do, in this thing. What are some of the priority things that we have to accommodate? The product owner should be able to say, in this next iteration, this is my focus. This is what I would like to accomplish. You can have the 60-20-20 rule or 80-10-10 rule as to how much commercial value add stories needs to be given, how much time for experimentation has to be given. All those things are customizable, but at the end of the day, that thing has to be prioritized. It's the product owner should have a roadmap in his or her mind as to how the product is going to be, the iterations are going to map to multiple releases. And finally, the risk should be factored in the user stories that are committed. When people are planning to commit a user story, if they are dependent upon other people to do some other work before they can continue to do this work, then the user story is not necessarily having that invest property. The independent part of it is really not there. And so risk is not properly considered at that point. So you have to consider risk into the user stories so that you are able to actually say, I am able to commit exactly what I think I am able to deliver. Then the coach creates the actual task. And now this is taking a micro focus. The coach is supposed to be the facilitator, mentoring the team, and guiding the team and all those things. But if the coach actually starts creating the task themselves as a scribe, once or twice is fine, but doing it consistently is not necessarily good. If that happens, the coach is not becoming a facilitator. As a result, the coach becomes more like a scribe. And that does not work very well for many reasons, because if the coach does this, the team does not become self-organized. The coach's responsibility is not only for the team, but also for the product owner. So if their team is really, productive and all those things, how do I make sure that the product owner is talking to other business stakeholders and getting ready with more prioritized stories and things like that? That needs to be there too. So if the coach is spending all the time in creating all the tasks and all those things and keeping up with all the work over there, then the coach is really not helping this particular process as well. On the other hand, the coach should harness the power of the team to collaborate for value delivery. And if the value delivery, what are some of those technical stories that we really have to add? Put it into the backlog. What are some of those process enhancements that we have to consider? Put it into the backlog. If that kind of a thing is not necessarily there, then the coach is not performing the role of a coach. The coach is there for the team. That includes the product owner as well. we need to make sure that the coach is doing that. And if there is more and more of those babysitting really required, then the team is not actually forming correctly. The 5 stages of forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. The storming and norming is not necessarily happening correctly. As a result, they are not able to do the performing stage very nicely. So we need to make sure that we are able to get the team to that particular level, right? And not everything in the backlog is estimable in hours. When people are trying to estimate everything in hours, you have to understand that not everything will be at a appropriate level for estimation. So backlog again goes by the D property, right? So when you look at this, you have an idea. That idea may not be completely fleshed out, and so you start dividing them into multiple epics, and then you divide them into different themes, and then from the themes you are getting the appropriate features that you want to develop. The features get broken into user stories, and the user stories are getting broken into tasks. That's how the structure looks. But when you look at this, the granularity changes across the entire spectrum. At the very beginning, the idea is too huge, like a huge dream, which gets broken down into castles and big house and a duplex home, and then a 2-bedroom apartment, and finally talking about how to get a loan approval. So the granularity is changing. So as time progresses, you are able to get down to a lot more granular detail. But at the initial stages, it's going to be too high. So not everything over here is a good candidate for estimation in hours. So when you look at these things, the dreams and epics, if they are too big and too large, don't even bother estimating them. Tell them that they are not at a level that could be estimated. So the product owner then has to work with other business stakeholders to flush it down further and get them into appropriate level. Now when you are moving into a reasonably sized, like I am understanding what I'm trying to do over here, but I need to still break it down further and things like that. Use t-shirt sizes. This is when you are using those small, medium, high, large, and all those things, and you are able to come down with appropriate levels. And finally, you are moving down to the user story and task level. At that particular point, these are all ready for iteration planning. At that point, you are looking at story points and hours. So the tasks are the one that is getting looked at in terms of the hours, and the user stories are actually using story point. That is the reason why we use the approximation of the story point, because we are not committing to, if this person is a very capable individual with high level of tenure and all those things, that person will take 3 hours. This person with no background will take 10. We don't want all those things. We want to be able to get down to an approximation level without any understanding about who will do it. So that's the user story. So that's why we use story points. That is the reason why story points exist. Not one story point should not be always equivalent to 1 hour. It needs to be case specific according to the organization, right? And these things, we have to establish the norms. When these things are not properly done, or the team is in the initial stages, or we are just piloting Agile, we have to establish some of these norms. We can't jump into Agile saying we're going to do Agile, very quickly. We have to establish certain norms and explain these norms to the people, and as part of training and coaching. Okay. Now, what are some of those antidotes to planning failure? So first of all, we need to avoid, some of the Titanic related problems. Like we know what to build and we don't want to go and ask anybody else. We know exactly what needs to be built. But then the product is in the hands of other business stakeholders and end consumers, and we have not gotten all the market needs correctly. And so we need to avoid this we know what to build syndrome. Right. The next one is the promote the product discovery. So when the Challenger was supposed to be airlifted by this, big airplane, the airplane was not initially meant to actually lift the Challenger. Right. So we have to come up with different ways of how can we actually make this happen. So promote product discovery. Certain times you have to do a few experiments because you will learn things by serendipity. Right. So we need to promote that. So we need to have certain time available for people to do some experiments. And then the next one is invest in a coach. Things are going to come. Planning, even regardless of how well you plan and how well you execute, things are going to change. But at this time is what you need a coach. Whether that needs to be privately coached or it needs to be a team level coaching. That's all, specific to the scenarios. But we really have to spend time with a coach. And finally, it's going to be this promoting of the self-organization. When when a flock of birds are flying in this murmuration format, they all know where they are flying. No birds are hitting with each other, and they are all able to move forward. Who is the head? Who is the leader? We don't know any one of those things. Who is the follower? We don't know any one of those things. Everybody is moving in different formations, but they know what to do, right? That's self-organization. That's the level we need to promote to within the team. And that's when productivity truly comes in. And if you are constantly monitoring what they should do, why they should do, when they should do, and all those things, we are actually enabling the failure, and we should avoid that. Okay. And then the team level. So when you're looking at the team level, I always tell together everyone achieves more is what the team stands for. So we really have to empower the team. And if you're moving from the prop date planning level to the next level, you're obviously, empowering the team. When you're looking at the team has to commit. So the team comes together as a group and says, this we can do, this we cannot do. It's not individuals that is actually getting the work done. It's the team that is collecting the work. Right? And so coach on the agile principles. I have done my part of the user story. If the other user story is not getting done, then that's somebody else's problem. That's not good. That's not conducive. Together we are making sure that we are meeting the iterations commitment. So we need to work on those agile principles. We need to work together as a team. So these are all, coachable moments as to how we get things together. Okay. So how are these things manipulating in different ways? So when people are not ready with the updates, the daily stand-ups are starting late. They are not ready, so they don't have that investment to come on time and be on time. And they take as much time as possible because they are converting the daily stand-up to be a status check meeting or a problem resolution kind of a meeting. Daily stand-up is primarily meant to answer those important 3 questions. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? What are the improvements? We need to actually focus on those things. But then if that's not happening, it's not a daily stand-up. On the other end of the spectrum, people basically have to be asked these 3 questions. So when I turn to the other person, I have to literally ask, hey, what did you do yesterday? Hey, what are you planning to do today? What are you going to, what are your impediments to actually getting things done today? I shouldn't be asking this as a Scrum Master. As I turn around, people are just ready to come down with these things. I need help with this particular issue. I'm looking for. So that's how collaboration truly happens. That's also daily stand-up is also another place for, osmotic communication and the high bandwidth communication to take place, right? And finally, when things are not working, they blame it on technology. I'm not, this is particularly the case with virtual teams or people that are remote and people that are traveling and not being able to come to the meetings on time and things like that. They don't have the mute button on, or they don't have the technology properly working. And so as a result, I'm not able to do the talking. So this is all indicative of their team's inability to connect properly, communicate, and collaborate because together they are not committed to the iterations goal. These things have to be truly understood and addressed quickly and for the team to succeed, right? And then the right metrics. We need to make sure that the metrics are meant to look forward and promote and foster the behavior that we want in the team, right? Certain metrics are definitely exist for a reason, like, you want to show the profitability metrics and all those things, but the metrics should actually do the right thing, the behavior that we really want. On the one end, we have too many metrics. We want profitability metrics, we want metrics at the team level, we want metrics at the code level, we want metrics at the testing level, we want metrics at, so then there's too many metrics, The most important thing is pick a handful of, maybe 3 or 4 metrics that truly matter to you and make sure that they are able to, keep it up to date, right? Something maybe at the team level, something maybe at the product level, something maybe at the strategy level, right? So you need to make sure that you are having, reasonably good set of matrices and not too many matrices. Not everything that can be measured can be, actually should be measured. Right? And then the next one is going to be incorrect metrics. We need to actually have the right metrics to be able to promote the right behavior, as I said. So for instance, let's say, you want to say, I would like to track the number of defects closed within every iteration. Well, then, people will introduce the defects so that they will be fixing it. And so now they are saying like, every iteration, we are actually constantly fixing more and more, defects. How many tasks are getting closed? That indicates how effectively our team is working together. Then people will create every little task, a task for creating a task, right? A task for updating the task. We can come up with all those other things that actually do not necessarily promote the right behavior, right? And finally, the metrics are not up to date. And we have way too many metrics or way inconsistent metrics. People don't buy into it. And as a result, we don't keep them up to date. The worst thing for any metric is not having an up-to-date clear metrics, because then people are going to lose credibility in that metric. And so we want to avoid that, right? We want to avoid such an issue at all right from the beginning. The next one is the risks wait for the next daily stand-up. And this is also an indication of not having a proper communication. When a challenge happens within the team, the daily stand-up happens, and then, a couple of hours later on the day, you find an issue. Now, when that issue comes, you don't need to necessarily wait for the daily stand-up for the next day, because if you think that way, then you are really not collaborating. You are becoming more of a person that is actually promoting the problem rather than promoting the solution, right? So how does this manifest? Not enough time for risk resolution. So the following day, when people are looking at the solution, the amount of time the previous day people had to actually collaborate and problem solve is gone. So we have very little time for risk resolution. And that means potentially the iteration commitments are not met. We don't have enough time to actually complete this work in this particular iteration. As a result, it is going to slip. And if we don't have the right mindset of Agile, what we will possibly end up doing is, we are Agile, so we can catch up in the next iteration. We are not going to do this. And people will come back and ask, I finished 80% of this user story. The remaining 20% is not done. Can I get 80% credit for this user story, points? No, you don't. And so we are trying to promote incorrect Agile. As a result, we can basically come back with a team commitment is missing because collaboration wasn't present at the level it should be. So when the team commitment is missing, they don't collaborate, right? When you look at all these things, the fundamental impediment is going to be the team's lack of ability to self-organize. We are in this together. We are committing this, and our ability to commit and deliver these things are very important for the product. So they are not able to see what they are doing on a daily basis to the iteration and to the release and to the business strategy at the end. So how is their work on a daily basis impacting their MVP and the MOV? They don't get a commitment to that, right? Those are some of the problems that you truly have to understand. So what are some of those antidotes to address the team failure? Forming a cross-functional team, promoting the cross-functional team, how a developer should be able to think from a testing standpoint, how a tester should be able to think from a developer standpoint, how both of them are able to think from a business and a system analysis standpoint, how a service delivery or a help desk person is able to provide additional thought process in terms of functionality and things like that. So a cross-functional team, so form that. If the team does not have that, promote that. Either have lunch and learn sessions where people are able to come and talk about these things. So promote that kind of a behavior. And then address the resistance to embracing change. Agile. Why are we doing Agile? And try to get to that and address the resistance. People may come with valid reasons, instead of telling like, there are adverse to using Agile. Instead, try to understand why they are not working with Agile or don't want to work with Agile. Maybe there is a reason why we should not use Agile for the particular pieces, because not everything needs to be Agile. Maybe a flavor has to be adopted. So address that, right? And then if we do focus on these things, train the team on Agile practices. How are we doing better? How could we be doing better? Why is pair programming required? Why is having good practices on coding required? Why are we actually making sure that we are having DevOps properly integrated? So try to make sure that we are training on the Agile practices. Agile is simple, but not easy to implement. Right? Avoid frequent member movements. So some person is actually committed today and that person is no longer available because that person is not 100% dedicated, or that person is also shared with other project or another production issue and things like that. So if there are too many frequent member movements, then the team loses the focus. They are not able to, continuously move forward. And focus is one of the important values of Agile, right? Now, at the process level, instill an operational excellence mindset, which means, don't compromise on the non-negotiable, right? If daily stand-up should be 15 to 20 minutes, make sure that is 15 to 20 minutes. If iteration backlog should be constantly, or the backlog should be constantly filled with, proper mixture of value-added stories, then you have to make sure that that's constantly there. Make sure that you are working on that. Retrospective should not be, considered an optional one. Promote a learning mindset. The Kaizen approach to continuous learning has to be constantly present. So now how do we make these things happen, right? So too many meetings. After the daily stand-up, the goal is that the team is committing themselves to do the work, right? And occasionally, depending upon the team structure, maybe some team is virtual and they're located in a different country in a different time zone. So you may have to adjust the team meetings in such a way that there is an additional office hour or additional time that the architect or the developer is setting aside to have discussions with the different team members. So I understand that, that those are all how the team is actually supporting each other. But there should not be like a zillion meetings that we are back, having to work on. And if the team is actually spending all the time on the meetings, where will the team's commitment to be actually doing the work, right? The next one is the product owner taking up too much of the team's time. As product owner is kind of setting up a backlog grooming kind of a meeting 2 hours every day. Well, then that's almost like 25% of their time is gone and everybody is sitting over there. And after the daily stand-up and, the time to actually do context switching and all those things, pretty much 1/3 or, half of the day is gone. So then the team doesn't have that enough time to actually continuously to work, right? The hands on the keyboard or time to collaborate. Team members serve on multiple teams, including some agile work and some support work. I am a product owner now, or I'm an architect here, but then I'm also shared for production support throughout this week. Well, then their commitment has to be reduced. It's only fair for that individual, right? Now, if you don't do that, then they are not able to balance the work, and this is an agile pattern problem within the management that we are having, right? Reviews are not open to the business stakeholders. One of the important thing about the review session is primarily for different stakeholders to look at the demo, look at the work in progress or work completed and provide feedback, because it's an opportunity to gather new ideas, new feedback and all those things and continuously groom the product backlog. And those review sessions are primarily fading because we are not opening that review session to other stakeholders. Now, there is also a pattern where the stakeholders come and actually monopolize the meeting and all those things, which means you have to actually talk to those stakeholders much in advance, because Agile as a framework has not been adopted across the organization. And remember, I talked about the siloed adoption, and that's happening, right? So you want to avoid that. And the next one is reviews become surprising to the product owner himself or herself. The product owner, it's not going to be surprising at that particular point at all. Because if the product owner is surprised about what is being shown in the review session, it's a problem primarily because the product owner should be constantly available for the team, right? Finally, the monopoly of the review time. Some people, again, this cognitive and motivational bias that I talked about, that comes into the play when people are actually spending more and more time on the specific user stories alone, preferred people's user stories. Like, I want to spend more time only on the user experience, the user interface. I don't want to talk about the back-end web services that is being written or the additional documentation written for the users. We don't want to spend all those time on that. So that's not good. We need to equally spend time to all the different people that have contributed on the iterations goals. Okay. Now, finally, the retrospective is getting compromised. If the retrospect become optional, which is a lessons learned or learning moment, if that becomes an optional one, it manifests in multiple different ways. One of the ways it is manifesting is the failure to learn. We are not learning at every potential moment, right? That's gone, right? The second one is we are not repeating what was successful, right? We don't know why it was successful, and we have not taken the time to understand it and replicate the patterns. As a result, we are not repeating the success as we want. And finally, we are creating waste we are actually, promoting things that should not be done, overburdening people, or creating processes that do not add value, and all those things are constantly happening. And this is what Lean tries to avoid, creating waste. So we need to make sure that we are actually learning whatever we are learning and try to make sure that we are making that across the organization, making it available across the organization as well as within the team. Okay, so what are some of the antidotes to the process failure? Enhance the process discipline, right? Agile basically said individuals and interactions over processes and tools. It does not come and say don't do any processes, forget about all of them, we'll only focus on individuals interaction. It does not say that. So enhance the process discipline. The processes are the one that is the glue that makes the product move from one spectrum to another spectrum. And they resist the urge for more task orientation. As long as it's done, it's checked, it should be done. So resist the urge for the task orientation. Try to come up with additional ways of how we can do better. If you are able to do this in 10 steps, how can we do this in 7 steps? Look behind the wheels, right? Engage stakeholders to commit to Agile. If they are not going to commit to Agile, at some point of the time, it's going to rub on other team members, and people are going to start pleading. The next one is make sure that technology is not sidelined. Technology is critical for value delivery. It's not sidelined. Anything relating to the technical user stories, let's not talk about that. It's only meant for technical people and we are all product people. That's not good, because technology should become a glue that makes people stick together. So we need to make sure that we are addressing some of these process-related failures as well. And if you are addressing all these 12 different patterns, we are going to start addressing all these 4 major areas that I talked about. And when these things are all properly getting addressed, we are having a good sense of urgency, we are having a good transparency across the organization, we have the team's commitment, we have the business stakeholders focus, and we also have the continuous improving or the Kaizen mentality that we need to have across the organization. When these things are there, you are basically going to make sure that every Agile ceremony is set up for success and you are able to move forward. So that brings me to the close of this session. So if you have any questions, please reach out to Tia on the course side of equation. And if you have any questions relating to the content, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Okay. And finally, the 4th webinar in the series is coming. So if you haven't already registered for that, please make sure that you are able to register.